With the release of Andy Muschietti's The Flash, the DCEU or DCU or Worlds of DC, whatever this is called, officially comes to an end. I don't think it's totally inaccurate to say this cinematic universe was pretty hit or miss, but at times this universe did have its high points, one of which many would argue would be the installment that kicked off this franchise, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. Despite opening to a mixed reception in 2013, the film has garnered a significant cult following, with many arguing Man of Steel was one of the highlights of this universe. I reviewed this film on Letterboxd a while back, but I'm feeling rather reflective and have some additional things to say. So without further ado, let's take a look at Zack Snyder's first chapter in a cinematic universe. I'll start by covering one of the best parts of the whole film: the amazing opening on Krypton. At least compared to other interpretations, Snyder's Krypton has a unique visual look. What we get to see of Kryptonian civilization, especially in its last days, is riveting. It makes Krypton feel like a more fleshed out world, and on top of that, there is some spectacular action on display that aids in establishing the tone, style, and the primary conflict between Jor-El and Zod that Jor-El's son Kal-El would go on to resolve. This film's interpretation of Jor-El is one of the things I appreciate the most about this film, because due to the extra screen time this character has compared to other interpretations, he is a more developed and well-rounded character. Russell Crowe does a fantastic job selling the audience on the character's morality. While the character does go on to fill the role he typically occupies in Superman storytelling, that being the wise mentor that acts as both teacher and father figure to his son Kal-El, I've always admired how this film portrays Jor-El as a father who just wants what's best for his son more than anything else. It adds an extra layer of emotional weight to the character, making his and his wife Lara's choice to sacrifice themselves to save their son more painful. Speaking of which, I particularly like the moment where Lara takes a moment to look at her newborn son before sending him off to space. More so than most, these portrayals of the characters feel more human and relatable because we're not just seeing the birth of Superman, we're seeing parents being forced to say goodbye to their child. It makes Jor-El's mentorship of Kal-El later in the film stronger because he doesn't just feel like an exposition machine designed to explain Krypton's history and Superman's powers. He feels like a proud father who genuinely wants his son to be the best he can be and for the world to see him as the hero he truly is. That leads me on to Kal-El himself, played by Henry Cavill, who gives a very strong performance as the titular character. First of all, Cavill looks fantastic in the suit, and second of all, he captures the internal conflict of the character beautifully. It's no secret writer David S. Goyer and director Zack Snyder presented a darker interpretation of the Superman character, one that's not as charismatic or even as jolly as Christopher Reeve's iconic performance, for instance. However, I feel this darker take works with the story quite well because this is a Superman who is trying to figure out who he is, and as such the film is about Clark Kent taking steps towards becoming Superman and dealing with the conflict within him. Not only is this gradual transformation conveyed fantastically through Henry Cavill's performance, but I love how the film utilizes both Clark's human father and his Kryptonian father to highlight his internal conflict. On one hand, you have Jor-El training Kal-El to embrace his powers and to become a symbol of hope for the people of Earth. On the other hand, you have Jonathan Kent telling Clark he must keep his powers hidden for his own safety. This results in some brilliant scenes, such as when a bunch of bullies throw Clark to the ground and attempt to goad him into fighting them. I love the anger on Clark's face here because he knows he can hit this guy and even wants to, but he also knows that's the wrong thing to do. So Clark just has to sit there and suppress the need to strike him. Scenes like this are so gripping because Clark is consistently thrust into situations where he grapples with the morality of his actions. It's also because of scenes like this that Clark's final transformation into Superman works so well for me. While the choice to structure this story in a non-linear fashion can be meandering at times, the story for the most part remains consistent, and the way Clark's experiences as an adult parallel his childhood do retain engagement. In the end, he lives up to Jor-El's teachings, embracing his powers and becoming a symbol of hope. However, he also retains his human identity as Clark Kent, and in keeping with the wisdom of Jonathan Kent, keeps his identity a secret and only uses his powers when necessary. An endearing journey because he struggles with two different ideologies and eventually finds the best of both worlds. On that note, I do really have to talk about Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent. A lot of people are divided on this portrayal of the character, and frankly, I understand why. He's a lot more cynical cynical and world-weary than more traditional interpretations, but for me, at least for this film, that's exactly why he works. This is a Jonathan Kent that cares so deeply for his adopted son that he's afraid of how the world may react if they were to discover that someone among them were extraterrestrial. So it's easy to understand why he would actively encourage Clark to conceal his powers. A contrast to Jor-El, yes, but I like how the two parallel one another as both are motivated by their love for their son, and just want what's best for him. However, a big issue for me is the utilization of Lois Lane. I just don't buy her romance with Superman. Yes, Henry Cavill and Amy Adams have wonderful chemistry, but their romance is sadly the film's weakest element. Not enough time is spent developing their relationship due to the fact that they spend most of the film apart from one another, which is also why I don't buy that Lois Lane, being as stubbornly driven a reporter as she is, and spending as much time as she did trying to find Clark after encountering him on board the Kryptonian ship, would then give up trying to write a story about him after having one conversation with him. Yeah, he did save her life, but I just don't think their connection was strong enough to justify character choices as significant as that one. By the time they shared their first kiss, I just felt the romance was rushed and rather forced. That is not to say it's a bad portrayal. I think Amy Adams does a great job with what she's given to work with here, but unfortunately, after the subplot where Lois is searching for Clark, the film doesn't quite know what to do with her. I appreciate the film tries to give her agency, but I've never understood why General Zod requests that Lois be brought to his ship as well as Superman, or why the military needed her to be there when they bombed Zod's ship. I mean, Jor-El does tell her how to destroy it, but she does tell Superman and the military how to do it, and on top of that, when the bomb malfunctions shortly before deployment, Lois isn't even the one to fix it, so why is she even on the plane? That being said, I do like how this film portrays Superman's relationship with the human race as a whole. In the vein of a First Contact story, it uses the uncertainty surrounding Superman to create tension between him and the humans, and I particularly enjoy that Superman has to earn their trust. It's a very intriguing lens to see Superman's origins through, as it explores the potential impacts of the knowledge that there is an alien walking among us. The scene where Superman surrenders himself to the military works for me, because he does it to show humanity that he is on their side, and while he is able to show that he might be trustworthy, I like that they still don't totally trust him, and are even willing to blow him up with the other Kryptonians later on. Speaking of the climax, having Superman and humanity work together to take down Zod and his forces is a great way to show their trust in Superman growing. Due to the world engine being sent to one part of the planet and Zod's ship staying in another in Metropolis working in tandem with it to terraform Earth, Superman, being the only one who can outmaneuver its defenses, takes on the world engine while Earth's military takes on Zod's ship back at Metropolis. It allows us to see the climax from different perspectives, but it also gives the human characters more agency, as the film's antagonist General Zod thinks so little of humanity that he literally uses the world engine to squish them underfoot to pave way for a new Krypton. So it's pretty cool and satisfying that humanity are able to prove him wrong by literally blowing up his ship and sending his entire crew into a black hole. We also get to see the climax from the ground as Lawrence Fishburne's Perry White and a couple of employees of the Daily Planet attempt to escape the world engine's devastation, only to end up with one of their own trapped under rubble. Seeing Zod's ship from a grounded angle where we're literally looking up at its devastation is terrifying because it makes the threat feel bigger and even makes the proceedings more emotionally investing. While we don't spend a ton of time with Perry White and his cohorts, there is enough for you to care about the character and understand that while he is the head of a newspaper company, he does put the needs of others before his own. Thus, when he realizes they'll be crushed by the world engine before he can get his co-worker out from the rubble, the moment he takes her hand to comfort her in their final moments is genuinely touching, and it makes the stakes of the climax feel more palpable. It's also a cool contrast between himself and Zod, who is willing to sacrifice Kal-El, a fellow Kryptonian, to make a new world. It is great to have a Superman movie where most of the human characters have not only narrative significance and a greater impact on the story. Getting back to General Zod, Michael Shannon is very intimidating. His performance is so emotionally intense. He's a character that's completely driven by his desire to build a new home for his people, and in that way he can be seen as a sympathetic figure who goes about achieving his goals in completely the wrong way, as he literally tries to extinguish one species to save his own. The sheer rage that Shannon brings to this role stupendously conveys a villain that is sympathetic, yet genuinely terrifying. I just wish he was in the film more. As great as Zod is, he disappears after the film's opening scene and doesn't appear again for a while. It is a shame because there are elements of the character that I think are rather undercooked. For instance, the Codex Jor-El sent to Earth with Kal-El contained all of Krypton's bloodlines, and on top of that, Zod hates Kal-El because to him, Kal's natural birth is heretical, which I assume is because he wasn't born from the Codex. It is clear that Zod wants the Codex so he can restart Krypton's population using the bloodlines it contains, but more screen time with the character could have further developed his religious beliefs, and on top of that, it could have given a little more insight as to how Kryptonian society works compared to planet Earth, especially in terms of how big of a role religion plays. Like, why exactly is it heretical to have a natural birth on Krypton? And if all of Krypton's population are born from the Codex, does that technically make Jor-El and Zod, for example, clones? And in what way does religion play into that, if at all? Aside from a few mentions here and there, the film sadly doesn't explore this much at all, and I feel like exploring it through the character of General Zod could have potentially been really interesting. Man of Steel has some of the finest action I have ever seen in a comic book film, partly because Zack Snyder does such a fantastic job conveying the physicality of the Kryptonians. Every punch, slam, fall, and throw has such weight and impact. The action is also gloriously destructive, as the Kryptonians tear through the surrounding infrastructure, and at times, it is hard not to be taken aback by the sheer level of destruction on display, particularly in Superman's fight with Zod. Although, if I did have one complaint with the climax, I would say that I think the film could have used a few more scenes of Superman saving people to balance out the destruction, as I think it could have made the idea that Superman is meant to be a symbol of hope for humanity more powerful, and overall, it could have made him come across as more of a hero. Visually, the film is mostly stunning. Zack Snyder is notorious for using symbolic high-contrast imagery, and its usage here results in some truly phenomenal cinematography, and the visual effects are mostly stellar. There are some instances where they don't hold up that well, but the effects that do hold up, the design, and the overall visual style are more than enough for me to look past it. Having said that, Superman's suit is too dark, and it doesn't stick out nearly as much as it should. It doesn't have the vibrancy or pop that Christopher Reeve's suit had, for instance, and I get that this being a darker take on Superman, the visual style should reflect that, but frankly sometimes I can't even tell Superman apart from Zod's cohorts who are all wearing black. Then there's Hans Zimmer's score, which... Look, I'm not even going to beat around a bush here. This score is pretty much perfect. It captures the symbolism of hope that Superman is associated with, while also delivering a score that feels and sounds epic in scale, adding a layer of gravitas to almost every scene. I say this with no exaggeration, this is one of the best film scores of all time. Man of Steel is not a perfect film, but I do feel it manages to overcome its flaws to become a darker but unique and overall, I think, very good take on Superman. I would even say this film was a promising start to what could have been a massively successful franchise and demonstrated a lot of potential for a very interesting story to be told over multiple films. But with this attempt at a DC cinematic universe at an end, it is a shame that Henry Cavill never got a proper chance to don the cape once again, especially considering his Superman really did have a lot of potential. But at the very least, I can look back fondly on his first outing as the Caped Wonder, as taken on its own, Man of Steel is a very strong adaptation of Superman despite its flaws.